Hey everybody, welcome back to The Practice.
Yay.
This is our weekly video for the South Orange County Church where we take the things that we're talking about on Sundays and try to go a little bit deeper and actually put them into practice. So we wanted to welcome you to, I guess it's our first real official
Happy
practice
New
video
Year.
of the new year. And I did hear several people that were talking about how they were really doing the annual examen from last year, and that it was really helping them, and there was some cool things coming from it.
That's exciting.
It
Yeah.
is exciting.
And if you were overwhelmed by it, don't be too discouraged. Just pick like 3 questions. Go for it, and then you'll be able to say, I did an examen.
Right.
But this year you did 3 questions. Next year you could do 4, 5, 6.
That's right.
You might grow a lot this year.
Whatever you got done.
Yeah.
It was cool to me going back and looking at I did that on my camera roll and looking through all the things that happened throughout the year. And it was, man, so many lessons through that. So many came up. But we wanted to talk today, just kind of keeping on the theme from Steve's message yesterday, that God is with us. Right. And I just think it's such a great concept to talk about and to think about and to choose to believe and to really be able to work through this idea that God is with us. And, I was thinking about how throughout the scriptures that this is the theme. If we go all the way back to the creation story,
that's right.
You had God in the garden just wanting to be with Adam and Eve, right? He wanted to walk with them in the cool of the day and be with them. And then when, all of that crazy stuff happened, they withdrew, and he's like, where are you? I want to be with you. Where are you? And so then, ever since then, God has been on this mission, this journey to bring us back into a relationship where we get to be with him. We see it with Abraham that he said, I'm going to make you into a great nation and I will be with you. Mm-hmm. And all of the heroes then and the different stories throughout the Old Testament that God was with them. He even came down into the tabernacle and then into the temple, that his presence was there with the Israelites. And then when Jesus came, as we studied Advent, that was the big thing about Advent, was it's Emmanuel, God with us. Yeah. And so that Jesus came in the divine form to become a human so that he could actually live with us and be with us. Amen. And then at the end of Jesus' life, one of the last things that he says before he's taken up to heaven is that I will be with you always. So we see this theme throughout the entire scriptures that God wants to be with us. Mm-hmm. And what a great thing for us to be able to, just to really meditate on and consider. Mm-hmm. In the next few months, we're going to be, on Sunday mornings, we're going to be digging into the Gospel of Luke. We figured we would just kind of take the story.
Keep going.
We're just going to keep going. And really talking about that. But there's so many different stories throughout Luke where you get to see Jesus as he's with people and how he's wanting to be connected and how he's casting the vision for this great kingdom that he is going to bring about. And we get to see Jesus in many different situations where where there's a lot of kind of stress and anxiety going on around him. Even the story, which we'll get to much later, about the storm when he's asleep in the back of the boat. But Jesus is completely at peace.
At peace, yes. And that's what we want to learn through the book of Luke, is how to not only obey the teachings of Jesus. Of course, we want to do that.
Right.
But we also want to learn how to imitate him, how to imitate his lifestyle. Just what can we learn from that? How can we be asleep at the bottom of a boat when the storm is happening because we feel so secure with God's presence? That's what's so beautiful, is that it is a fact that God is with us, but it is not something that we always feel. Mm-hmm. That's why we have to practice the presence of God. We have to practice being in his presence. We have to remind ourselves that he is there. Even though it's a fact that he is, our bodies may not agree in the moment,
So if we look into Luke, we've got all the baby stories of Jesus, which we just looked at, and then we've got all these stories about his ministry for those 3 years. But there's one story in there that we wanted to look at a little bit today, and it's the only story that we have of Jesus from his youth. When he was a kid, in that time period between being a baby and then growing up to become the Messiah. Like, what was that like, during that time? And we have this one story where we get to see even kind of a preview of Jesus' ability to have peace in the midst of chaos. So Luke 2, let's just read it. Luke 2, verse 41. It says, every year Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart.
So for years and years, I've looked at this story from the point of view of Mary, of course, the mom that's lost somebody, which I've lost my child, and it was incredibly terrifying. And I know some of you have experienced this as well. And so I've always looked at it from Mary's point of view.
Right.
But this time I was reading and I was thinking about, what about from Jesus's point of view? You know, here he is, he's 12, and you know, if you're not familiar with what you felt like when you were 12, I try to picture the people I know that are 12 or around that age, which are kind of the guys that are in the Heritage Project right now.
Right.
So Odin and Evan and Joshua Wynn and, you know, some of that age group. And I'm thinking that maybe, even though at the end of the day, maybe Jesus realized,
Right.
dang it, my family's gone. You know, he must have realized at some point that he had gotten carried away and that, you know, he was here all by himself. I mean, he was there all by himself for 3 days. So you would think that he would be, you know, somewhat alarmed.
Right.
But we don't get that picture at all from this. You know,
Right.
we really do get this picture of Jesus being at home in his Father's house.
Right.
He was with God.
Yep.
And it's here that we first see the very first story of Jesus being in a chaotic situation, but being at complete peace because he is with God.
Right.
This is one of those times where we get to imitate Jesus. We want to learn how to be that guy at the bottom of the boat while
Right.
all the chaos is going on and he's asleep.
Right.
We want to learn from Jesus how to have that kind of peace because we absolutely know that God is with us.
Right.
We know that this is a fact.
Right.
It's not something that we're trying to imagine because we're trying to make it up. No, we know it's a fact, but oftentimes our bodies or our minds do not acknowledge it as a fact.
Right. Because God is always with us, right? God is everywhere. But it's us that has to bring ourselves
Exactly.
into the awareness that we are in his presence. We're always in his presence. We're just not always aware of it.
Exactly.
And we get into this mindset where we feel like that we're alone and we feel like that we have to do everything ourselves. You know, I mean, so even with all this stuff that's going on right now with our church, we're meeting this week on Tuesday night to be able to talk about the Rolling Stone article and what does that mean for us, but then what does that bring up in us, you know, as we are thinking that through and some of the feelings that many of us have had over the years about different things. And so we're wanting to process that in a spiritual way and do that. But when we have these moments of where we're feeling unsettled or there's a disquiet in our soul or there's fear that could come up about certain things, what that does, even in our brains, is it isolates us, right? Then the amygdala starts going, the fight or flight thing, or the freeze, you know, and we get to a point where like I can't see anything except how do we get out of this? How do I get out of this? And then we feel like that God has set something in motion, but he's distant, and we have to fix this on our own or get through it on our own, or what's going to happen? You know, what's going to happen to us? That feeling can come up. Practicing the presence of God is being able to remind ourselves that we are right here in God's presence and we will be okay. Mm-hmm. If God is for us, we will be okay. Mm-hmm. And being able to kind of calm down that alarm system that is ringing in our heads and remember that we are existing with Jesus right beside us, that his Spirit is living in us, and he will guide us through it. We're not doing this separate from him. When circumstances get difficult, it doesn't mean that we're separated from God. It means that our alarm system is going off and we're trying to figure out how do we fix it. So what we want to do is practice ways to bring us back into God's presence, because he's the one who can fix it. He's the one that can deal with these things. There's a great book called Practicing the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. I'm sure many of you have read it over time, but he wrote it several hundred years ago, but this concept is so deep, and I love to go back to this book. But there's this one quote that I wanted to... There's our dog again. But there's one quote that I wanted to read to you about this concept today. He says, "The difficulties of life do not have to be unbearable. It is the way that we look at them through faith or unbelief that makes them seem so. We must be convinced that our Father is full of love for us and that he only permits trials to come our way for our own good. Let us occupy ourselves entirely in knowing God. The more we know him, the more we will desire to know him. As love increases with knowledge, the more we know God, the more we will truly love him. We will learn to love him equally in times of distress or in times of great joy." I love that idea that as my love increases with knowledge, that I'm going to be able to know God more, and that my love for him is going to be the same, whether I am in times of distress or whether in times of great joy. So when things are good, I'm going to realize that, God is still good. When times are bad, I'm going to realize that God is still good. I've been praying a lot lately to not allow my mood to be determined by my circumstances. Because sometimes I look at my circumstances and they stink. But I don't want to allow my mood to come from the bad circumstances. But at the same time, sometimes circumstances are great and I'm feeling really awesome, but I realize I don't want my mood to be guided by the great circumstances, because circumstances will change. I want my mood to be guided by the fact that God loves me and I have this ability to be in this relationship with him. There's a book by a guy named Thomas Kelly called A Testament of Devotion. And in this book, he kind of expounds on this thought a little bit of being able to have things going on surrounding us, but then find God at the center of it. And he says this: "There is a way of ordering our mental life on more than one level at once. On one level, we may be thinking, discussing, seeing, calculating, meeting all the demands of external affairs. But deep within, behind the scenes, at a profounder level, we may also be in prayer and adoration, song and worship, and a gentle receptiveness to divine breathings. The secular world of today values and cultivates only the first level, believing this is where the real business of mankind is done. But we know that the deep level of prayer is the most important thing in the world. It is at this deep level that the real business of life is determined." And that just helps me to go, I want to grow in that ability, that while chaos is swirling around me, I am at peace in my heart with God, because I know that he is with me.
Exactly. This whole idea, this is not new to us, to have to remind ourselves that God is here. Like if you think about when you pray, so many times we pray, "God, please be with us."
Right.
And, we all just do it out of habit. But if we really thought about what we were saying, we would realize, no, we don't need to pray that prayer anymore.
Right.
We don't need to pray that God is with us. We already know God is with us. What we need to pray is, "God, help me to become aware of your presence right now in this situation."
Right.
And it's not new to us. As long as people have been trying to follow Jesus, they've been trying to figure out, how can I remind myself that he's there?
Right.
I have fallen in love with visualizations over the past few years, but I used to think they were so weird, woo-woo, crazy, mystic, that's silly stuff. And I think it does get all mixed up with the people that do the manifesting, like they're going to manifest something into existence.
The universe will bring it to me.
Yes,
Right.
if I picture it. But that's not the kind of visualization I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the visualizing what is actually already happening, which is Jesus is here.
Right.
I'm trying to find ways to be able to visualize his presence that makes it more real. I'm visualizing something that is a fact, that is already here, not something I'm wishing was there.
Right.
And, it reminds me of the story of St. Patrick. For those of you that, you may already know this story, but the short story about the original St. Patrick is that he was a Scottish guy that got kidnapped when he was 16 off the shores of Scotland because he was supposed to be in church that day, but he wasn't. His parents were they were in church and he was out on the beach. But these pirates captured him, took him over to Ireland, and he was a slave there for many, many, many years. He finally escapes. Of course, while he was there, he came to meet his creator. Okay. He came to meet God. And he developed this relationship with God that he'd always heard of when he was growing up. His parents had taught him, but he had never really accepted. When he was in that slavery, he found God. So he comes back to Scotland, everybody's excited, but what happens is he feels this call from God to go back to Ireland to witness to those people, to reach out to them, to baptize them, to be a missionary to Ireland, right? Well, which is crazy business, So ultimately he does some training and he gets ready and he does go back. But when he went back, he was afraid. I mean, he wasn't thinking, well, God's with me, so everything's going to be okay. He wasn't thinking that. He was thinking, I am called by God, and this is very dangerous. Right. I could be killed in many various ways,
right.
Because it was a pagan nation. So he was afraid a lot. So he came up with this prayer that helped him. It's much longer than this, but this part is the part that I thought would help us with this practicing the presence of Jesus. It says, Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ when I lie down, Christ when I sit down, Christ in the heart of every man who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of every man who speaks of me, Christ in the eye that sees me, Christ in the ear that hears me. And I just picture him having to say this to himself over and over and over. It's a prayer of reminder. Jesus is walking next to me. Right. Jesus is above me. Jesus is behind me. Jesus is beneath me. Jesus is before me. He is everywhere. And I say this a lot. This is something that I try to do, is I try to remind myself, you're not alone, Tracy. Whatever situation you're walking into, Jesus is walking in with you. And that really helps me to think, to be able to visualize something that is real. I think we wanted to, this week and every week, we wanted to give you some sort of practice that you could do that will help you to internalize this, right? So you're trying to take the knowledge that you have in your mind, we all know it's true, but you're trying to get it deep into your DNA, deep into your body. And so we've talked about this before, but it is quite a challenge. And one of the things is to make sure that whenever you drive somewhere, it could be the grocery store, it could be a friend's house, it could be to your church, it could be to your small group, wherever, then you want to get there early and do not get out of the car.
Right.
Don't get out of the car. Just sit in the car for 2 minutes. We're saying 2 minutes. I said 5 minutes.
She said 5. I said I don't think we can do 5.
It's going to be too long, right? Okay,
yeah,
so you just sit there for 2 minutes.
Set your alarm on your phone. There's a timer. Set it for 2 minutes.
And while you're sitting there, you're slowing your breathing, right? You're taking some deep breaths. And then you're reminding yourself of the presence of God, that you are not alone. That maybe you're going to say this, something similar to this St. Patrick prayer. It's something that I do. I don't say it exactly like that, but I remind myself that Jesus is with me. You are not alone. You are never alone.
Right.
So sitting there for those 2 minutes to set yourself spiritually, to remind yourself that before you walk in somewhere, you're walking in with Jesus.
Right.
And that's one way that you can practice the presence of God.
Right. So take a deep breath, bring yourself into God's presence, and remind yourself that He is with you. And that will help you as you're navigating all the things that you're going to be navigating this week. So we look forward to seeing many of you at midweek, and hopefully you're able to listen to this sometime throughout the week, maybe come back to it and listen to it again, and that this will start to really grow in your heart. We do look forward to starting into the book of Luke more deeply on Sunday, and really taking it from there. We're excited about that. So until then, we love you guys, and we'll see you soon.